Hey, it's TDA and welcome to episode 20 of this perfect ratio run. I did a poll when the new patch came out a few days ago to decide whether or not we were going to continue this run or start over with the use of all the new stuff we got in the patch. And your answers were, well, actually it was pretty much 50-50 between the people that wanted to continue and the people that wanted to start over. So what do you do in a situation like that? Well, obviously you do both. So what I'm going to do is I am going to finish this series. We're actually just a few builds away from completing the goal, which was a few achievements and of course white science. And then I'm going to start over and kind of optimize this particular type of playthrough in combination with something I've done before. And I haven't actually seen anyone else do that yet, especially not of course with doing the proliferators on top of that. So basically what I'm going to do is, well, you'll just have to join in and watch it, I guess. No spoilers just yet. I'll save that for the first few episodes of the new run. But before we do that, of course, what we have to do for this run is we're going to make a perfect ratio build for two things. We need the, what are these actually called? Spray coater. This is proliferators in my mind still. Spray coaters, and we need, of course, the stuff to put in there, so the proliferation units. So what are we going to do? We're going to make a perfect ratio build just for that. It is straightforward. The spray coaters actually do need 4 different items, so that's a little bit inconvenient, but it's not the biggest problem in the world. So we need steel, the, what are these called? Plasma exciters, which you basically don't need for anything almost, except for apparently this, and some oil recipes, some circuit boards, and some components. So let's start out with the components first. In order to get a perfect ratio, and in this case we're going 43 per second, sorry, 1/3 per second, because that is the production speed of this thing. It produces 1 every 3 seconds, which is way more than you're ever going to need. But okay, let's just go with that. Am I actually out of assemblers? Oh, I'm making this Mark II assembler somehow. I'm not sure why I'm doing that. So let's make it Mark III. There we go. And let's make sure we're actually building with the Mark IIIs. So, components, which need some copper and they need some silicon. And we are going to put the copper on the outside over here. No, the silicon. The copper is actually going to come on the inside over here. Because we need a few other things, of course. We also need circuit boards. But before we make those circuit boards, we also need to worry about the plasma exciters. Now, in order to make plasma exciters, we need some prisms. And this is going to be overkill, but that's okay. We need some prisms and we need the plasma exciters over here. So the plasma exciters need, like I said, prisms, and they need magnetic coils. Now, this is all not going to be very complicated. In order to make prisms, we need some glass. So we're going to put a glass on the belt over here. And in order to make the exciters, we need some magnetic coils. And we are going to make those right over here in an assembler on the other side. This is going to be the magnetic coils. Now remember, and I'll actually mark this up so you can follow along more easily. We have the copper over here, we have the silicon over here, and we are going to have glass on this particular belt. Now, of course, we also need a belt to connect the components in the back over here to here. And we are going to bring out the plasma exciters over here as well. So that should fix that part of the build. Remember, this is going to be the plasma exciters, and then the components are going to be on this belt over here. Components, where are you? There. Okay. Now, we also needed the circuit boards, and since circuit boards also need copper, we are going to place it over here, so we can use the copper for multiple things, which is what we have been doing, of course, in this series all along. And then we need an outgoing belt for the circuit boards over here. So now we already have 2 of the 4 items that we need for the spray coaters. Like I said, it's not the most complicated build, but it's nice and fun. And it's also fun to do something simpler compared to the previous builds that we have been doing. Now, in order to have enough glass, we're going to need 4 glass smelters. Like so. And we're actually going to have to smelt a few other things, because obviously in order to make these nice little magnetic coils, we're going to need magnets, and we're going to put those on a belt over here. And for... that was a few times too many. Let me try that 5 times. There we go. That means we need to put in the copper belt a little bit longer. And of course we also need to make this glass belt a little longer. And we also need to make sure we are getting stone from somewhere, because obviously the glass smelters need stone. Now, remember, we also needed the silicon on top over here. And to be exact, in order to keep the building production up, we are going to need 6 of those, like so. So if we do it like that, we are going to have a nice little build that makes silicon, and we have stone coming in, and of course we do need to supply this with silicon ore, which we're going to do like this. And remember, this is the silicon belt, and this is going to be the silicon ore belt. And before I forget, this is going to be stone. Stone, stone, stone. There we go. All right. Now, we have the magnets over here, which actually do not have an outgoing belt just yet, which is going to be this belt. So that means that we now have both the copper as well as the magnets for the magnetic coils, but we need iron for circuit boards as well. But before that, let's make sure we actually are producing the copper, because we can do that over here. We need 3 copper smelters in order to supply both the magnetic coils as well as the components over there. So that should work out just fine like that. And just because it is annoying me, I'm going to put it like that, so it's all nice and even. Okay. Now, of course, we do need to get the copper ore in as well from somewhere. And as you can see, we are shaping up to have a nice location here for an ILS. But we're not quite done just yet, because we also need some iron. And we need iron for 2 purposes. We need iron for the circuit boards, and we also need iron for steel, because remember, this also requires steel. Now, copper is obviously not iron, so let's switch those up. There we go. And we need to have some more ore for that. So we are going to bring that in over here. So this ore is actually going to be supplying both these iron smelters as well as these magnet smelters. And autosave. There we go. And now we are going to do something that I think is quite elegant. We are going to be placing 4 smelters for iron, like this. Not iron, steel, obviously, because we already did iron. And then this outgoing belt for the iron is going to go past the steel like this. And then the steel belt can simply wrap around like this. And this. And this. All right. So that all looks pretty nice. Just to make sure we don't forget, this is the steel. Not that it really matters, but anyway. And this was going to be the iron belt. And that actually means that we are pretty much done, because now we have, as you can see, we have the plasma exciters over here, we have the circuit boards over here, we have the steel over here, and we have the components on this belt in the back. So now all I need to do is make sure this gets some power. We need to put in the nice little row of foundations at the edge and some ILSs, so be right back while I do that. And we can continue on with the proliferators. Okay, all ready? Let's light this up and see if it actually works. And then we'll have our spray coaters incoming. We have all the ores on the belts already. As you can see, it has all been flown in. We are now producing steel, magnets, copper, glass, silicon. It all seems to be working, so that should mean everything else is working as well. These prisms, as well as the magnetic coils, are directly inserted into the exciters. So case you were wondering why we didn't put any belts there, there's no reason to. And of course we have the components being produced now as well. And as you can see, we have our first spray coaters already. Now what you can actually do is you can put those spray coaters on this production chain as well. To be honest, it's not really needed, because what's the point in producing even more spray coaters when we're going to be producing way more than we need anyway. So, however, that won't be applying to all the different builds, but in order to spray anything, we need to build some proliferators. Now, proliferators are really cool, and I put a tutorial explaining exactly how this works. To be honest, everyone seems to be still figuring this out, what the optimal way is to use it, etc, etc. I'm starting to get the hang of it myself, but to be honest, it's really fun. It's really a new, cool mechanic. So for example, you can spray your proliferators with a spray coater as well to optimize the use of your proliferators or spray coaters. But anyway, I'll get to that in a moment. Let's first start building this. Now, depends a little bit on how big you want to make this. I kind of took the middle way, because just making one of these assemblers work is really small and efficient, but it's also kind of underwhelming. 1 times this production at Mark 3, and for some reason I can put down a Mark 2 assembler, so let's upgrade that in a second. But what we're actually going to be doing is we are going to be producing 3 per second at Mark 3 speed, and that means that at 3 per second you should be able to supply 6 full belts. Actually a little bit more if you spray your sprays. 6 full belts of materials. So take that in mind if you're going to scale this up. You are probably going to need this build a few times over, depending of course on how many proliferators you use, but I decided to keep it in a kind of a manageable state. So we're going to put down 4 of these, and congrats, now we can use very big Dyson spheres. And this is going to be producing 4 every 1.5 seconds, so that means that, yeah, we are going to have a nice little production of 3 per second. Let's see. In order to make proliferators, we need more proliferators. So it's a 1-to-1 ratio, really nice. So that means if we have 4 of those, we are going to need another 4 of the Mark II ones. Now I'm going to be looking around where the items are, I think, a few times, because obviously they are new. And apparently very hard to place down if you're me. There we go. Okay, and how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to bring that belt all the way around the back over here and tie into that. Nice and easy. Now, what else are we going to do? We are going to need some carbon nanotubes, which are going to be a little bit annoying, but no problem. We will be able to manage. And we are going to need a second belt for that. And actually, I think we're going to put the Mark IIs on this. And let's make this belt the nanotubes. So just to make sure we know what we're doing, nanotubes over here. And then we're gonna have the Mark IIs over here. And now they're in a different spot. Why is that? I don't know. But anyway. In order to make these Mark IIs, we are going to need Mark Is, obviously, but we're also going to need diamonds. Now, how many diamonds? We are going to need 12 smelters to be exact. And I am going to put in a few belts so I don't forget what we're doing. There we go. Something like this. And that means that we can have a belt like that. Now, smelters. And how many smelters do we need? Well, we are going to need... Let me make sure I space this out correctly. I am actually going to remove a few of these smelters, because we actually don't need those. But we're going to need 12. This is 9, 12. And we are going to be smelting diamonds in here. There we go. Now, in order to make diamonds, we need, of course, some graphene. Graphite. Yes, even after all these episodes, I am still saying that wrong. I guess I'm never going to learn. Anyway, graphite. There we go. And we can use direct insertion for that as well. Now, in order to make graphite, we are going to need some coal, and we're going to bring those around the back. You know what else needs coal? By now you probably do, but if you don't, in order to make Mark I proliferators, you need coal. Just coal. Very simple. Very straightforward, really nice for the early game. And by putting the belt in like this with the coal, we can now make that. So that means, let's make sure that we finish off these belts. So this is going to be the belt with the diamonds. Diamonds over here and coal over here. And like I said, what we're going to do with the insertion, we're just going to insert those straight into each other, so we don't need a belt for the graphite. Now, that means this is pretty much also done already. So what we can do for that is simply take a belt like this, connect it up, and there we go. Now we have supplied the Mark 1 proliferators as well. So this is pretty much done. Now, we're not completely done yet because we still need those nanotubes for the Mark 3 ones. And in order to make nanotubes, of course, you know, we are going to need even more graphite. And let's make sure we do that. There we go. And this is why I deleted those first two, because what we are going to do is this. We are going to need 14 of those. And this way we are not wasting any space. Well, we sort of still are, but I think it looks kind of okay like this. You know, I like my symmetry, so not really symmetric, but at least it's close enough. That's it. Let's call it that. And we'll have an outgoing belt of graphite over here, and then of course we do need to have. I actually prefer my outgoing belt to be the outer one. Doesn't matter, no, but I just prefer it that way. And then we have coal, and look, we already had a coal belt over here, so apparently there's going to be an ILS there supplying us with coal, so we might as well make use of that like this as well. And that does mean that we can have an ILS somewhere over here. Let's say like this. And that ILS will be doing a few things. That will be taking in our proliferators over here. That will take out some coal. And since we're going to be making proliferators, we are also going to make use of that by doing this. And probably something like this. There we go. Because we are now building proliferators and we should have plenty of those. There we go. And if we put in a proliferator over here and we place two next to each other, and this can be a little, at least I'm always struggling a little bit by actually getting to this to connect. There we go. Pressing shift helps in order to connect these things. For some reason it tries to connect to the belt below, and that obviously won't work. But this way the proliferator loops in on itself, and you can actually spray all the proliferators themselves. And what you could actually do as well, and that is part of personal preference, but you can also spray your proliferators over here. Now I'm actually not entirely sure yet if this works if you get non-sprayed proliferators mixed in with sprayed proliferators. You might as well test. So let's see if that works. And in order to make that work, of course, we are going to need a splitter over here. Let's see if that works. There we go. All right. But that still doesn't fix our nanotube issue, obviously. So what we are going to do is we're going to build a hell of a lot of chemical facilities. Let's flip those around because I don't like the facing otherwise. Something like this, I think. And we are going to need 7 of those. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And those are going to make the graphene that we need for the carbon nanotubes. And then remember, these need the graphite as well as acid. Well, luckily we already have our graphite over here, so we can put those in. Let's have an outgoing belt of these as well. Why an outgoing belt? Because it's not a perfect ratio when you construct these. Actually going to flip that belt around and do that like that. And by a perfect ratio in this sense, I mean a perfect ratio in terms of the number of buildings, because otherwise you could directly connect them. But we actually only need 6 carbon nanotube production facilities over here. Yes, only 6. Yeah, only 6. It's still a lot, but yeah. That's what you get when you don't have Mark II. Okay, TDA, this is not working. There we go. There we go. Ah, this one is misaligned. I was wondering why that wasn't working. There we go. Can't have misaligned buildings now, can we? Okay. And that means that we have an outgoing belt with carbon nanotubes over here. Now, of course, this won't actually work because we don't have titanium just yet. So let's make sure we reserve a belt for titanium. That is going to come in from down there. A few more things that we need. We are going to need acids. And I kind of overshot there for a moment. But the acid is going to go from over here down this line. And we are going to make sure to leave enough room for the titanium. And that means that we can put the acid production over here. We are only going to need 4 of those, because acid is a pretty straightforward process. Of course, you can simplify this recipe if you use sulfuric oceans, but I've not been using any rare resource sources. Resource sources? Is that the word? Anyway, resource sources. Let's go with that. In this playthrough so far, and I figured why waste that little prestige until the end. So just gonna finish off with this. It's quite straightforward to make, but if you have that, you can of course simplify your recipe. Now, titanium, and we also need some titanium ore from over here. But on top of that, we are going to need a few more things. We are going to need the stone, the water, and the oil for the acid production. Now, how nicely does this align? Don't you just love how this goes straight through? I do, anyway. There you go. That means we can place an ILS over there. Make sure we connect those 3 resources that we need down here. And this is also why I put the incoming belt for the ore on top. So of course we only have 3 connectors over there, so we can use this side to connect the ore. And that is pretty much the entire build for Proliferators already. So let me hook everything up with sorters, power, etc. and let's see if it works. And we're done. I hooked up all the power, all the sorters. As you can see, the production is nicely going on its way. We have Mark 1 sorters being produced over here. We have the Mark 2 sorters being produced over here. And then the Mark 3 sorters over here. They are going into the ILS, wrapping around. And then this is actually buffing itself. This means that rather than getting the normal production we would get from this, we are buffing it by 25%, which is really nice. If you haven't seen yet what proliferators do, you can see it over here. Because we are supplying this with buffed proliferators, actually it's not fully buffed, as you can see. There were a few unbuffed in between. But anyway, that will fix itself in a moment. As you can see, this is buffing itself, and by doing that, we have this second production circle going around, which is basically producing free items. Apparently I'm a bit low on power, so that's probably the reason why this spraying is not working optimally yet, but it has everything to do with the charging ILSs that I just placed down. Now, one thing that is really important to note though is that I have now the definite proof that if you spray your proliferators where you're producing them, they will still be sprayed when you export them, because these proliferators have been flown from this ILS to another ILS by a drone, and as you can see, they come out buffed. So this is really nice. So you can simply spray your proliferators wherever you're producing them, and then use the buffed version everywhere else. Now, what does the buff do? Rather than giving 60 charges to a spray coater, it will give a total of 75 charges to a spray coater. So it buffs the amount of uses for every proliferator that you make. And of course, the fact that we're buffing the inputs here as well means that we're getting bonus production. That's just free stuff. I like free stuff, don't you? Okay, well that wraps up our build for today. That means we now can produce as many proliferators as we want. You can scale this build up quite easily. It's not that big. You can place it pretty much everywhere you want, including in the areas around the poles. And we have of course, the little tiny production over here for the spray coaters themselves, which you're probably going to need to build one off in order to get all the proliferators that you will ever need. I hope you enjoyed this one, and remember to tune in for the next few episodes when we wrap up this series before we start over and do everything even more perfect. I hope you are excited for that as well, and I hope to see you in the next one.